Hello, Coleman First Baptist, and welcome to anyone else who is enjoying this. Today, we're doing something I'm calling the Daily Calm with Pastor Tom. I realize I probably should have called it the Weekday Calm with Pastor Tom because it's only on weekdays. But today's Daily Calm comes from Genesis 50. Now, Genesis 50 verse 20, I'm hearing so many Christians quote this verse right now, and so many preachers talk about it, and they should. It's a great verse. It's the one where Joseph tells his brothers, hey, what you intended for harm, God intends for good and is already bringing about the saving of many lives. It's a great verse. In fact, I did a Daily Calm about it just a couple days ago. Today, I wanted to look at the verse that comes right before that verse. What did Joseph say right before he said to his brothers, what you intended for evil, what you intended for harm, God is working for good? Well, if you look at the context, remember, Joseph's brothers, though Joseph has promised to forgive them, and Joseph says he's not holding a grudge, they start to wonder, is he only being nice to us because of Dad? And once Dad's dead, is he going to change his mind? Sure enough, when their dad dies, they come to Joseph and they say, hey, listen now, before he died, don't forget, Dad wanted you to be real nice to us, right? And don't stop treating us with favor. And they bow down before him, which incidentally is a fulfilling way back in the Joseph saga. Remember, he had that dream that all his family members would bow before him. And this is a fulfilling of that dream. At any rate, when they bow, are you going to mistreat us now that everything's passed and we've done all this harm to you? Are you going to hold a grudge? What's going to happen? Joseph says something in verse 19, the verse before the verse we're all quoting, verse 19, that is just as powerful and just as full of faith. Joseph said to them, Genesis 50, verse 19, Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? It's a good question for us today. Am I in the place of God? In other words, when I preached on this at Coleman First Baptist, I told everybody what Joseph is saying is we need to get out of God's chair. When I was a boy, my mom was a substitute teacher, and anybody who is a teacher's kid knows that sometimes you get access to places maybe you shouldn't have access. You get to run around a little bit after school, and sure enough, and I would run after, and I remember sitting in somebody's chair. I don't remember. Let's say it was the principal's office, and I had snuck in there, and I'm sitting in that chair and acting all crazy and thinking I'm all by myself when suddenly the principal himself walks in. And all he said was, as I recall, all he said was, son, I believe you're in my chair. And I sheepishly get out, and I'm in so much trouble, and I'm so embarrassed, but I realized I was sitting in somebody else's chair. I was pretending to have the authority as a little boy I had no business having. Do we do the same thing as Christians? Do you ever find yourself sitting in God's chair? What do I mean by that? Well, we're sitting in God's chair when we hold a grudge, like Joseph could have held a grudge over his brothers, but he realizes it's God's job to judge and to show mercy and to rightfully sort all this stuff out. It's not our job. But here's the one I thought that would be applicable for a daily calm. I realize I'm sitting in God's chair when I'm filled with excessive worry. I need to stop and say, wait a minute. I'm sitting in God's chair. I'm not in control today. So the best thing I can do today is get out of God's chair. It's interesting, there was one human who had a right to sit in God's chair, and it was Jesus. And the only one who had a right to sit in God's chair instead was hung upon my cross. So who am I to sit in God's chair when the only one who had a right to sit in God's chair hung on my cross? I'm talking about Jesus, who died for us and rose again and ascended, and according to Hebrews is now where? Seated at the right hand of God the Father. So there is a good and perfect judge, and he's worried about tomorrow, which means I don't have to. He's concerned about my future, which means I need to get out of God's chair today and let God be God.